Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Hello, everybody. We are almost to the end of March, which is crazy. Q1 will be done very soon. I can't believe how fast the year is going. My daughter is very close to graduating from her first year in high school, which as I say that, I cannot believe. So I am very proud of her. She has done an amazing job this year, and I just think she's amazing. So many of you on the podcast who listen know her. She's just a great kid. So I'm a lucky mama. Okay, so enough of that. I want to talk about wage hour compliance. And I know for some of you, your eyes are glazing over and you are thinking, you've got to be kidding me. I do not want to be talking about wage hour. Doesn't she always talk about wage hour? Well, first of all, no, I don't. We have a lot of other topics that we have covered here on this podcast over the last couple of years, going on 3 years, actually. But we need to talk about it. Because whether you're in California, where you have a real incentive to audit your wage hour practices, to avoid liability under the California Private Attorneys General Act, which is the law that has really hit so many employers hard here in California since its enactment in 2004. It has really resulted in just employers going to mediation and having to write huge checks for what seem to be pretty minor issues that don't even affect an employee's pay. The employer is happy to correct the pay errors, but they still have all these penalties they have to deal with. Doing an audit gets you out of that. But even if you're not in California, I don't care if you're in Australia or you are in France or you're in Georgia in the United States, where you don't have a lot of state-specific wage hour laws, you need to audit. You need to make sure you are paying people correctly. Number one, people come to you because they need to work. Okay, now I understand some of you may have amazing jobs like chocolate tester. Okay, I would be a chocolate tester for no money. You could sign me up and I can tell you, is it good dark chocolate? Is it a little too bitter? Is it smooth enough? I would do all that for free, okay? But most of us, the jobs we have, we've taken those jobs because we need to pay our bills. And when you're in a situation where you are not paying employees what you told them you would pay them, or you're making deductions that you're not supposed to be making, or you're not reimbursing them for their expenses for their jobs, you are really creating a cultural problem in your organization. Forget about the law, okay? You're going to have legal issues as well, but you're creating a situation where people feel underappreciated. And in this market, you can't afford to do that. If you want to recruit the best and brightest and you want to keep them, you've got to treat them well. And the first fundamental principle of that is paying them what you said you were going to pay them, right? Paying them fairly and consistent with the law. Now, here's what happens. This is why I think we have compliance issues in wage hour. First of all, the laws change all the time. So I don't care what state you're in, what country you're in, the laws change and you've got to keep up with them. And it's not easy to do. We do our best. We try to help clients with articles and podcasts and webinars and all of those sorts of things. We do a monthly newsletter. We try to do everything we can to let you know, hey, something big is going on and you need to pay attention to it. But ultimately, you may need a couple of different sources. You may need to make sure that, you can really rely on the information you're getting. So you really want to think about, okay, what are my resources? What am I going to do to help me stay on track with what these laws and requirements are? If you don't, you end up following a law that you thought was the current law that isn't, right? So overtime laws change, rest and meal period breaks rules change. You've got all sorts of provisions, in California, for example, we're always getting a new leave law, reproductive loss leave, bereavement leave, voters leave, election officials leave, California Civil Air Patrol leave, jury duty leave, witness leave. I mean, leave, right? Which I guess that's probably a good topic for next week. So when we think about this, you've got to have a very clear idea of how you are paying people. And are you doing things as important, for example, as including the right information on your wage statement? We do these audits for employers, and it's shocking to me that they use a national payroll company, but their pay stub is wrong. Their overtime calculation is wrong. They are not listing the correct name of their entity. All of that matters in many states, including California. So when you think about, okay, why should I undertake this whole audit process? It seems like a lot of work. Yeah, guess what? It is a lot of work. But it's not as much work as having to prepare for discovery responses in a big lawsuit and go be prepared by your employment lawyer for your deposition and testify in trial or go to mediation and then pay a huge sum of money. So it is definitely worth it to do the audits. Now, I rarely say this, but I'm going to say it now. You need a lawyer to do the audit with. Here's why. If you use your legal counsel, I don't care if they're in-house counsel or out-house counsel, if you use lawyers, much of your process will be privileged. And that is important because no matter how committed you are to compliance and no matter how good of a job you think you are doing, there will be mistakes found. And you want to be able to keep those under wraps until you fix them, right? So you want to be able to decide, okay, how am I going to remedy the fact that we didn't properly calculate the regular rate of pay so all of these employees didn't get the proper overtime? How do I want to fix that? And if you do it with a lawyer, you're able to have those conversations confidentially. So it is important to use counsel when you're doing these audits. Again, I am not all about using lawyers. I don't think it should be a full employment for lawyers situation with everything that comes up in employment law. Much of it can be handled in-house HR professionals or HR consultants, or I work with a lot of them who are amazing, who know what they're doing and can be super useful. The value you get with a lawyer when you're talking about an audit is that attorney-client privilege. Okay. You also get what's called the work product privilege, where everything your lawyers prepare for you as part of that audit process is considered privileged as attorney work product. So lots of things to think about there in terms of the audit, but you want to do it with your employment counsel. Now, the other thing to think about with these wage hour audits is how broad you want to go. For example, if you have multi-state operations and maybe you're just worried about California and New York, then just do California and New York, right? That's okay. If you're really thinking, hey, I don't only want an HR audit, I also want somebody to look at my leave policies, and I want to make sure that I'm evaluating whether I violated any National Labor Relations Board precedents. Now, of course, with the new presidential administration, we're going to be we already have seen quite a pullback from many of the NLRB precedential decisions and opinion letters and memoranda that have been issued by the General Counsel's office. We're definitely seeing changes in these areas. But even so, you need to make sure that you're complying with whatever the new interpretation is when it comes to the National Labor Relations Act, the Family and Medical Leave Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, USERRA, and all the rules about military leave. You've got to know what they are. So we're talking today about a wage hour audit because that is what your employees really feel when it comes to the money. That is the claim they are most likely to make, is a wage hour claim. But we all know there are plenty of other claims they can and do make related to leaves of absence, disabilities, reasonable accommodations, those sorts of things. So when you're doing an audit of a wage hour issue, you've got to gather the records. You have to make sure that the person who's reviewing the records understands them. Do you need to provide them with some sort of an answer key? Do you need to have a meeting with them before you kick off, for example, and then potentially once a week during the process to answer any questions, to raise any concerns? All of these things are really important to having a successful audit strategy. And it's something that you really want to take the time to think about. Now, the other value of a wage hour audit, of course, is that you get to figure out what you're doing wrong so you can fix it, hopefully before anybody else figures it out. right? Before a lawyer figures it out who wants to sue you, or the Department of Labor, or the California Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, or any of these regulatory/enforcement agencies. So it really gives you sort of what you get when you go for a health checkup, right? They're going to check your blood pressure, your weight, your medication. They're going to ask you how you're feeling. All of those things are going to be on the table. That's what we're doing when we do a wage hour audit. Do we have the documents we need? Do we use the language that is correct? Are we identifying the employees who are affected by a policy clearly so that there's no ambiguity about what needs to be done and who's going to do it? Because remember, as the employer, if you're the one drafting these documents, whether it's a bonus plan or a commission agreement or an offer letter, you're going to be held accountable for any ambiguities. Anything that is unclear is going to be interpreted against you and in favor of the employee who received the document. So there are a number of reasons why auditing these other practices are going to be so important. The wage hour audit is our focus these days because there's so much potential savings for liability when it comes to wage hour issues, particularly in California, but also throughout the country, because the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, also gives employers a break when it comes to penalties and assessments when they have been able to show that the employer has done their best. They've made changes, they've corrected issues, they've made sure that they've done what they need to do to actually get the organization running appropriately. So wage hour audits are critical. You want to do them with counsel. How often should you do them? Once every couple of years should be enough. If you are regularly changing practices and policies, though, you may need to do it more frequently on an annual basis. There are always handbook revisions you're going to make in a year. That doesn't mean that you have to do, another wage hour audit, but it does mean you should be thinking about what your practices are and whether those changes are going to create any kind of confusion for your employees. Do you need to provide training? Do you need to provide some sort of memorandum or conversation about what's going on? All of those things become very important. It is not going to behoove you to conduct a wage hour audit and then say, well, I've decided I'm not going to do anything about these items. I mean, you can do that, but it doesn't make any sense. You just paid money to have somebody like us come in and do an audit for you. And we provide very specific feedback and very specific guideposts for our clients in this area. And then you are in a situation where you need to figure out, okay, I got the audit results. Now what do I do? How do I implement them? We call this audit remediation, right? How do we remediate the problems that the audit has revealed? And that's a very important part of the process. Again, if you get the audit report and you put it in the circular file and you don't do anything about it, it is an utter waste of money. So if you retain someone or you use someone internally to do an internal audit, you want to make sure you have a wage hour audit or any other audit. You want to make sure you have a time frame, that you have everything all set out so everybody knows what the expectations are. That is a critical part of that process. So do the wage hour audit, do an HR practices audit, understand what is lurking underneath your policies and your procedures and your practices. I know it's scary. It's like cleaning out your closet, but when it's all done and you put everything back in a super organized way, it's worth it. All right. So I want to remind all of you about the 2025 California Legislative and HR Leadership Summit that is sponsored by both the Sacramento Area Human Resources Association and CalSHRM. It is April 23rd, 24th, and 25th. At the Sheraton Grand Hotel in downtown Sacramento. You're going to get SHRM credit. There's all sorts of things you're going to get. I'm going to be speaking on my birthday on April 23rd, my 59th birthday, which I cannot quite believe, on navigating compliance with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. which is going to be super important because even though there are some tweaks being suggested to that law, the administration evidently does not intend to get rid of it wholesale. So we are going to still having to be dealing with that throughout the country. So definitely join me for that. Also, I want to remind you about our upcoming performance management webinar we're having on June 4th. We're going to deal with wage hour compliance on August 13th. And then, of course, we are talking about wage hour audits in a lot more detail on March 26th, which is just coming up. We have a few spots left in that session, so please register for those. Go check them out on our website at shawlawgroup.com, and you'll see all of our live training offerings. Everyone, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. I know I'm going to. It is a beautiful day here in Sacramento, not a cloud in the sky and a light breeze. And I'm just trying not to think about the summer that is coming more quickly than I had hoped. All right, everybody, thanks a bunch. I'll see you next time. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others. Post about it on social media and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.